So, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Sunday Shot. It is great to have you with us on this Sunday morning. I confess that, again, we have pre-recorded slightly earlier, and we are with you on Zoom, so you'll see one of our beautiful faces at a time rather than all four at once. But hiding behind the speaker view at the moment, is, as ever, my co-host on the Sunday Shot, Dave Milner. Hello, Dave.
G'day, Joe. G'day, everybody. I am in an uncharacteristically good mood right now.
Wow. So we can have japes and jives with Dave for the rest of the afternoon.
No, not quite. I suppose, but like I did see Oasis three times. Zoran did win in New York, and Dick Cheney is dead and still dead, as far as I can tell.
Oasis three times. Okay, we're going to have to unpack that a little bit, but maybe off air. We have joining us again on the Sunday Shot two of our favourite panellists. Marie Coleman is with us. Thank you for coming back on the panel, Marie.
Pleasure to be with you.
And Daniel James is back with us as well, which is a wonderful thing for us in this momentous week with the passing of the treaty bill in Victoria. So we're looking forward to getting into that as well. But before we do, the news of the week. Well, Dave's already mentioned the terribly sad news that came out of the US about the death of the person being described as the most powerful vice president ever, Dick Cheney. But Dave, there are probably a few other adjectives that one might use to describe Dick Cheney as well.
Yeah, war criminal, I think, is probably the most astute and on point. This is no single architect is behind all the mass misery that was the Iraq and Afghanistan war. But if any individual bears a sizable chunk of the blame, it is this man, responsible for untold misery of millions of people. And you don't need to do what Kamala Harris did, which is put out a wishy-washy statement about how sad you are and how respectful and how wonderful this diplomat of American empire was. Just don't need to do that.
No, Marie, do you think this is an occasion where you can put aside the niceties, or do you have to respect the office that an individual held, however appalling they may have been? You're quite happy to just
Just to chuckle.
to wish him on his merry way. Down, down, down he goes, I'd say. But as Dave alluded to in his little intro spiel as well, in America, the Democrats had a pretty good day yesterday, Dan. It was there'd been all sorts of metrics that had been devised as to, you know, if they got this, this, and this, that would be a good night. And then if this, this, and this as well, that would be a great night. And wow, if they got everything, it would be a truly spectacular night. And they seem to have got pretty much everything that they could have hoped for.
It was a truly spectacular night for them, particularly in New York with the new mayor, Mamdani, who I haven't been following it that closely because I didn't want to be accused of following a mayoral election half a world away, closer than mayoral elections here.
Yeah.
But he certainly was he's a straight talking New Yorker type that has shown that if people get a free run at going to the polls and aren't hindered in going to the polls, then the MAGA movement can be, if it bleeds, you can kill it, as Lee Matthews once said of the Brisbane Lions when playing Essendon. So yeah, there would be a great deal of hope around the States and potentially around the world at the moment. But it's still very, very early days, and we've got a long, long way to run. We're not even 1 year into
I know.
presidency, and we're still a long way, another year off midterms. So let's see what happens between now and then.
It has been a meteoric rise from Mamdani, though. Like the New York Times was saying just a year ago, he would be out hunting for people to talk to. You know, one of those sort of desperate candidates. You won't recognise me, but I'm running to be your local representative. And now he has swept in. And I was pleased to see that he also got above 50% of the vote. because there had already been a narrative starting to develop that he could only win because it was a three-way split, and the Republican was acting in this spoiler way. But no, once you've got over 50% of the vote, you've got over 50% of the
Won
vote.
it fair and square.
Yeah, and also we had Virginia, New Jersey, and Newsom doing his bit in California to ensure that he can kind of try and combat any redistricting that's happening in Texas with some redistricting of his own. So they won. The Democrats literally won everything that they ran for. So let's hope they don't manage to stuff it up. Know that that's possible. We had in our parliament just Thursday morning the amendments to the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act passed the lower house. The government accepted precisely one of the, I think, up to 84 amendments that the crossbench had put forward, and that was about the way you have to report on offsets. So any attempt to tighten any of the loopholes, clarify some of the definitions that are very wide at the moment, like what national security and national interest means, so you can just basically ignore all of the carefully negotiated safeguards which have been included in the bill. I mean, it's going to be more difficult for them, Marie, when they get to the Senate, though. They can ignore the crossbench now on their proposed amendments to try and tighten this up, but they're still going to have to pick that pathway at some point between the Coalition and the Greens to get it passed.
And it's hard to know whether the Coalition is going to be unified on this either, because they don't seem to be able to reach a point of mutual agreement with each other on anything. So but I don't think it's not going to be easy to get a coherent opposition to this bill, simply because of the possibility of the government trying to do a deal with Canavan, and so it's a worry.
Yeah, I think, look, it'll be, from what I can understand, is if the crossbench and the Coalition and the Greens may come together to put it off to scrutiny in a select committee. And frankly, with 1,500 pages worth of reforms and some really critical issues still being up for debate, that would not be a bad thing.
A Senate inquiry is obviously the sensible way to go. But if the government is determined to get something through this side of Christmas, it's a bit hard to know how they're going to go. That's my worry, is that somebody will do a deal and the damn thing will get through all 1,500 pages of it.
And it will be the worst possible version of it in that scenario. Yeah.
Pretty nasty.
Yeah. We shall see. I think they are also debating their freedom of information reform, and that is a very much a friendless bill when it comes to the Senate. Neither the Coalition nor the Greens seem in any way inclined to pass that in its current form. I have a T-shirt which has got an FOI joke on it.
Yes.
Probably we'll be able to see in our Speaker View Zoom.
Will that be in the shot gift shop after the show, or?
We do need new merch. Let's think about that one, Joe.
We are going to have some merch out for Christmas. So
a comment on one of my recent articles was the ALP thinks FOI stands for fuck off idiot. I thought that was pretty solid.
Yeah, I think there is some truth in that. So, a lot that the government are trying to crunch through before the final sitting day at the end of the month. I think they've got their work cut out for them. Susan Lee also seems to have her work cut out for her. The media love talking about the killing season. I'm not going to talk about the killing season, but I think between the renegades of the Nationals like Barnaby Joyce, the actual Nationals, and now the right wing of the Liberal Party, is that she seems to be almost as friendless as the FOI bill, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was in Susan's position, and I do not want to be in her position, I do not envy it at all. I think it is, I feel sorry for her, to be frank. I really, really, really do. But she should look at history and see how it's gone for other Liberal leaders who have appeased the hard right within the coalition to retain their leadership, and see how that's played out for them. She has one thing to her advantage, and that is the next election is like 2 years, 9 months away. If she wants to hold her ground, she has the manoeuvrability to be able to do that in timing, and the fact that no one else really wants her job at this stage.
Mhm.
This is actually potentially a bit of an opportunity for her to, I guess, draw a line in the sand and actually prove her credentials as a leader for the coalition. But the way things stand at the moment, it's an absolute ragtag of vested interests guised in various ways. I mean, the assertion that energy prices in the regions in particular are going through the roof because of renewables hasn't been properly tested. It is just a grab line that has been sort of doled out by the Nationals in particular. This is an opportunity for Susan and the Liberal Party, if they ever want to go anywhere near winning any of the Teal seats back, to actually potentially chart a new course. But whether they'll be in government again in my lifetime, we don't know.
I'm suspicious she's in the role in the way that when a large corporation is flailing about and it's in trouble, that's when they put a female CEO in position to take the hit, and then they get a man in for the rebuild phase afterwards. That's what I cynically think is happening.
It used to be the same for state governments too.
Yeah, the glass.
There is a pattern. And, without Susan Ley, who is going to keep us safe from Joy Division T-shirts?
Indeed.
As if anybody knew what they were.
Well, I actually was vaguely aware of the origins of that, just as I was of Spandau Ballet. But in the end, I think the band had transcended that, and nobody's really that worried about what Albo wears when he's coming off a plane after a long-haul flight, however comfortable it might have been in his private jet.
David, do you wear your Oasis T-shirts on your private jet when you're flying about the place?
Of course, mate. Absolutely. I'd be crazy not to. Style,
I hadn't really picked you as an Oasis kind of guy, Dave, but I think that's the thing about Oasis is that they actually cross a whole range of unexpected demographics.
They transcend. Soundgarden today, Metallica this weekend, if that's more characteristic.
That does slightly fit more my view of you. But anyway, the other thing which is happening in the next few days is the 50th anniversary of the dismissal of Gough Whitlam's government, Labor government, who had come in 23 years, I think it was, in opposition through, as what Keating would describe, the torpor of the Menzies era, just got their bums on the government benches when the biggest Labor rat of all, John Kerr, enacted his revenge. Marie, you were actually in Canberra at the time that this happened.
Yes, I was.
Can you give us a sense, before we get into the kind of the constitutional argy-bargy and raise our eyebrows at the CIA, can you give us a sense what it was like in the lead up to that day, so during the crisis that had been engineered by the blocking of supply by the Fraser opposition, and then on the day when it actually all took place?
Look, I think after the Prem changed his cabinet around and moved Jim Cairns out of Treasury, Hayden into Treasury, that seemed to trigger a whole fresh round of extraordinary bloodletting within the cabinet. And one got a strong sense of disunity. Hayden was trying to introduce an economically sound budget, which was quite a challenge because Gough really wasn't really interested in economics. He was interested in the program. Jim Cairns had a hissy fit. Initially was offered Social Security but refused because it was so mundane. And then I think he may have got environment. John Wheeldon was brought into Social Security from Repat. Wheeldon decided that he didn't like Hayden. He described him to me in one meeting as altogether too cloth cap. And Wheeldon decided that he would run an alternate economic strategy, and he employed two economists through my commission to run opposition inside government to the budget that Hayden was trying to bring in. So, look, the situation was pretty febrile,
Yeah.
to put it mildly. You had other bits and pieces going on, so that I didn't feel that the government was in an orderly situation, really, after that change. For those of you who are interested in the minutiae, Johnny Wheeldon had a principal private secretary called Jim Anthony, who disapproved of the way Wheeldon was handling the portfolio. And he, during that period, decided to spectacularly make a speech at the ANU and tell the entire world what he thought about his minister. It was that kind of...
Yeah.
You'd sort of go into the office and say, I wonder what piece of rubbish is going to eventuate today. It was very much like that.
Marie, is this just, again, a millennial that wasn't there, I've only heard about this in the past, is this just male egos butting against each other? What else is happening here?
Well, that was going on. I don't know where Wheeldon thought he was going, frankly. I have no grasp of what he thought he was going to achieve, but he certainly wanted to run an alternative budget. I don't think Gough was even aware of this kind of stuff going on around him. So that was pretty messy. And one just got the sense that everything was up in the air. It was very turbulent. I mean, because I wasn't in PM&C or in AGs, I wasn't as close, but you were reading every day about Rex Connor and Kemlani, and the Strangler is sleeping beside the fax, and you'd think no government can survive this kind of stuff. So
yes, Paul Keating's view on the state of the government was that there had been, and there was clearly a lot of chaos around it. And as you say, febrile, I think, is a very good word. But that as Bill Hayden tried to sort of assert his authority as treasurer, he brought in a budget that did seem to be, from an economic point of view, righting what had been a listing ship. And so had the government been allowed to keep going and, run its term, there is still the possibility of turning things around before the next election was due. That's
right. But Fraser was determined that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And Reg Withers was far too competent as a eminence grise in the Senate. If you read Troy Bramston's book, he tells us that Reid, who was leader in the Senate, and Whitlam weren't even talking. So strategizing wasn't going on. And Gough, I don't remember anybody in Canberra at that time who trusted Kerr beyond Gough. He was widely disliked, as was his wife. She was universally referred to as Fancy Nancy. And it was very distasteful all the way around.
F's and C's are coming up here with Mary in terms of labelling people.
But we were talking just before, Daniel, that it did seem sort of extraordinary that, as Marie says, nobody trusted Kerr, and it seemed to be widely judged if not assumed, that a dismissal of the democratically elected government could be on the cards. And Gough was the one who seemed to be rejecting that as an outside and ludicrous.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, that was part of the difficulty, was that Gough really thought that nobody would break that convention. And Fraser and Kerr were organising to do it. I mean, there was a lot of other bloody-mindedness with Anthony Mason and Barwick, who hated Gough with a deep and abiding passion, which went back a long way. Whether they were colluding in the most improper fashion with Kerr in terms of advice.
Well, I think they were. I mean, it's one of the things that Jenny Hocking, in the great service that she has done for the Australian population, has uncovered. After struggling to get these documents released from our national archives, that Mason, I mean, that had been the one which I think shocked everybody, because it's be completely improper for the Governor-General to be breaking the Convention of the Separation of Powers and seeking his own private legal advice from the High Court.
Well, it was all absolutely ridiculous. But the day of the actual dismissal, there were rumours running around all day in the morning that something was going on. And there was some reason for a military event with, one of those sort of 21-gun salutes early in the morning. And I was getting phone calls saying, "Is there a military coup? Is this what's happening?" And people were gossiping during the morning before that actual dismissal took place. That was the atmosphere. It's really hard to convey how extraordinary it was. And then, of course, the news spread very quickly, and that what had happened once Gough came back from having his steak lunch and explained to people what had taken place. One of my daughters told me that she was actually in the crowd outside. She was a schoolgirl. Her teacher, hearing bits of the news, had taken the class down to be part of the crowd outside Parliament House at the stage when Smith read the proclamation of the dismissal. There were crowds. It was just amazing. And people were so astonished because this had, constitutionally, even if you thought something had to happen to get the government back onto a stable footing, nobody really believed, I think, that something that tore at the fabric of the Parliament would really occur like that. It was shocking.
So, Daniel, I mean, Gough had some ideas about, calling a half-Senate election, those sorts of things to try and break the impasse in the Senate. But it really did seem to be that Kerr was colluding improperly, as Mary says, with the leader of the opposition, with High Court justices, in order to bring down someone that he had determined and with whom he had been corresponding back to the UK for months about his suitability to continue to be Prime Minister. It wasn't a short-term thing. It had been thought out, vetted by the old Dart back in London. All of that had happened before November the 11th.
Yeah, Whitlam gave Kerr very clear and strong instructions that he was only to take advice from his Prime Minister when it came to these matters. And history has shown very clearly that he was seeking advice from High Court judges, former colleagues. He was speaking to Malcolm Fraser about it, and he was on in regular correspondence with the palace itself. So it seemed that almost everyone knew what was going on and where this was potentially leading. Like Marie said, there must have been rumours flying about the place left, right and centre. But another thing that we've come to realise in recent years is that when it comes to the impasse in the Senate, there were 5 Liberal senators that were going to vote for supply to be passed through the House. So whatever calculations that Kerr was making at the time, whether he knew that that was a potential outcome with this, didn't even stop to think about it. He deceived Gough, not only in terms of withholding information, but also in the way he conducted himself with his interactions with Gough, not letting on in any way, shape, or form that this was a distinct possibility. Now, Kerr will go down in history as a tyrant, as someone who was full of deceit, someone who was a drunk and not fit for the office, someone that was the fourth pick by Whitlam to go into that position. But the other thing that will go down in history here as well is Whitlam's appalling character assessment and appalling judgment of the situation and of the man he was dealing with.
Because, I mean, Marie, what does seem to have also kind of come up and now be accepted fact is that Gough was getting explicit warnings that this might happen. And he was the one who said, no, Kerr will do the right thing. He's too proper not to.
Yeah. Well, I think that was precisely it. You've got to remember that Whitlam's father had been a very, very senior bureaucrat. Whitlam believed firmly in the propriety of the way things should operate in Canberra, and it seemed to be beyond his understanding that some people could break protocols. I mean, given the things that have been going on with Vince Gare and that funny little man from Queensland who replaced him, you would have thought that it might have crossed Gough's mind.
This is a pattern with progressive individuals because it's a very similar phenomenon. Like Trump told us the anti-constitutional things he was going to do, and we all just progressive people decided not to believe that because we wouldn't do that ourselves.
That's right. Yep. Yes. Well, I think that's a good comparison. That Gough just didn't believe that people would behave so improperly.
And I think it also goes to how ingrained and how strident the born to rule set within the Liberal Party were. You know, Malcolm Fraser in particular is the bluest of blue bloods when it comes to the Liberal Party. And their very strong belief that they are the party of government and that this mob under Whitlam were not deserving of government and that they would do anything within their means as part of the establishment to bring him down and bring his government down. I don't think we can sort of understate how determined they were from their particular perch to bring this to a head sooner rather than later, no matter what the cost.
Speaking of born to rule, Daniel, we alluded to this before. Whenever I hear this story from people that were there and older than me, there is a murkiness around the American involvement, in the CIA's involvement. There is still documents sealed well beyond the time that they should be surrounding the American involvement. Did we get Latin American style coup, or is it something else? What's your assessment on their involvement?
The great work that Professor Jenny Hocking has done on this in terms of the palace letters and the Governor-General's interaction with the palace itself and all sorts of people in between, didn't go into the rumours and the conspiracies, not based without sort of foundation that the CIA was, if not somehow involved in the dismissal, they were certainly involved, many believe, in the following campaign that was held after the dismissal, in which Gough recontested again, this time as opposition leader, to win back government. And we saw the Murdoch press in particular go out of their way to really, really, really nail him down and make sure that he was never to return to government. Now, there are all sorts of conspiracies about how that was supported by the Americans at the time, either through the CIA or through diplomatic channels, even potentially. There are rumours about who some of the actors for the CIA in Australia were, which I won't repeat here because I can't prove it. But that is a fascinating story, David, that is yet to be properly told. but a lot of it's going to require another Jenny Hockey to come along and get access to a lot of those files.
Well, I think Brian Toohey has been doing a bit of that work, and it seems to me that I don't have great deal of in-depth knowledge about this, but that the Americans had been very nervous in particular when Gough had started making threats that maybe Pine Gap's time was going to be up. And now whether or not he was actually going to do that, and it was more an assertion of his authority and our sovereignty, it's unclear, but that was enough for the Americans to get the wind up, as it were, because they strategically couldn't afford to lose Pine Gap here on our soil. And so then started looking at various options as how they could ensure Whitlam's longevity was short, but that did not extend potentially to getting involved in the messy dismissal. But as you say, then once that had been done by the likes of Kerr and the Palace.
I think Gough had done a pretty good job by himself of showing that perhaps he wasn't the man to lead a government beyond the time that he did. He did a lot of wonderful things, but by the end of his tenure in November 75, as Marie was alluding, the place was just an absolute mess. And so you combine that with a very strong sort of political campaign through certain aspects of the media. There was, very small chance he was ever going to get back.
But he did.
Yeah, and I was just sorry.
Oh no, you go.
I was going to add that back in that comment about how the Liberals felt generally about Labor. I worked very closely with Margaret Guilfoyle after the change of government, and she would often use phrases like "when we resumed government," which I thought had a nice touch.
Yeah.
The resumption of government, is
situation normal again. We are back.
Born to rule. My God.
Yeah. But I mean, whilst there was so much of an uproar about what happened in 1975, the truth is there's nothing actually to stop that from happening again.
I would argue that in this era of Trump and post-truth and fake news and silos and echo chambers, that the political scene is fertile for this sort of thing to happen again. If you make the wrong choice and get the wrong person in that position, there is nothing stopping this from happening again. Even if we became a republic, if we were just changing the head of state from the British to an Australian, unless we went for further reform, there's nothing to stop this happening again. And what we've learned from this saga is how much our democracy is actually reliant on convention, on doing the gentlemanly thing. Well, a convention and a precedent has been set through Kerr's dismissal of Whitlam. And we're also a democracy and a legal system that is based on precedent. And now we have the precedent.
Well said.
Yeah. Just as much as America is finding that out themselves about how much their democracy was based on conventions and protocols that, if you're just ignored, can come asunder. So we also found this in the last little while that changing our constitution can be bloody hard, and the loss of the referendum on the voice was really brought that home, I think, to all progressives who had hoped that that would be the birth of a new era in terms of our relationships with First Nations people here in Australia. That didn't happen, but what has happened in Victoria this week, Daniel, is something possibly as momentous, if not, I mean, it's only in one jurisdiction, but it is the first time that an Australian government has sat down and negotiated a treaty with, has negotiated a treaty with First Nations people and set a framework around a formal framework of how that relationship will be moving forward.
Yeah, until last week, Australia remained the only Commonwealth nation that hadn't signed a treaty with its with the First Peoples of that particular nation. And so last week was an incredibly momentous occasion. I'm very pleased to be here talking to you about it and for the invitation to be talking about it, because I don't think it's received the coverage that it deserves. The formal treaty process and the establishment of it, and the scaffolding and the groundwork that went into building it started in 2018 and continued on through the pandemic over a 2-year period, in which to get this up off the ground required a great deal of consultation with Aboriginal communities around the state that was thwarted through the pandemic, but they still managed to get to a point where they were able to establish a First Peoples Assembly that would take charge of negotiating and getting the treaty process to a point where a treaty would be passed in legislation and signed by both governments. But then on top of that, and probably more crucially and more impactful, was, of course, the referendum debate, which was a result that gave license to conservative politicians right across the country to basically put everything First Nations under the banner of the referendum, in terms of any sort of idea of representation, any sorts of ideas of working in true partnership with governments, sort of being stacked in the bin. So we've seen Queensland walk away from their truth-telling and treaty process up there. Northern Territory has done the same. South Australia has a legislated voice, which is good to see. But only in Victoria do we have an official treaty now that has been negotiated between the First Peoples of this state and the Crown through the government as equals. And that's what this is.
Daniel, what does the treaty say specifically in outline?
First of all, the treaty, the preamble to the treaty is a very sort of inclusive statement. It names what happened here, but it also names the opportunity that lies ahead. The treaty opens the way for future treaties to be developed between traditional owner groups and local governments, or through the state of Victoria themselves. So this is the statewide treaty. But in terms of practical things, it goes a lot to the land and water rights of First Nations people. But the thing I'm really big on, it sort of guarantees that in the curriculum, in the state curriculum, the true history of what happened in this place, warts and all, will be taught in Victorian schools, holus bolus. That for me,
in stark contrast to Tony Abbott's stocking stuffer.
Exactly. I was really amused to see that book come out at this time, because through the Europe Justice Commission, we released a report called Truth Be Told, which was kind of like the first time the history of Victoria was told from a First Nations perspective, through all the witness testimony that was given to the Europe Justice Commission, all the history that was provided and all the literature that was provided. So, I would hold that up against Tony Abbott's view of Australian history any day of the week.
Absolutely.
But the fact that we've got to a point now where that's going to be taught in Victorian schools is huge, because we can no longer say, "Oh, we didn't know." Yeah. As of now, every kid is going to know.
There's a famous quote that comes up in post-colonial studies all the time. A Lakota man, Sitting Bull, who fought off General Custer and was, I guess, later murdered in his sleep by the apparatuses of a white supremacist state, the cops, in this particular instance. And the quote is, "What treaty have the Sioux made with the white man that we have broken? Not one. What treaty have the white man ever made with us that they have kept? Not one." You are a Yorta Yorta man from the north of Victoria. What does this mean to you personally, I guess, as a Yorta Yorta man?
It means a lot, to be honest with you. I come from a particular line of heritage within the Victorian Aboriginal community that comes from the same place that that William Cooper, the Yorta Yorta man who famously marched to the German consulate in 1938 or something, complaining about the treatment of the Jews by the Nazis in Germany at the time. I come from the same stock as Pastor Sir Doug Nicholls, who went on to become the first Aboriginal governor of any state when he became governor of South Australia. These are people that were left in the ashes and only had embers to sort of pick up and carry forward with them. And they did it with dignity. They did it with a tremendous amount of pragmatism, and they did it with a tremendous amount of courage as well. And what this treaty process has kind of reaffirmed to me is that that spirit and that line still resides within the community. So we've relied on our ancestors going through the dark to carry the embers so they can hand them to a new generation and they can turn them into a flame to carry forward into their future. And that's what the treaty document is. The treaty document very much recognises what happens in the past, but by and large, it's all about the future, because what happened in the past and what people feel about the past really isn't our business, but what happens next is.
I suppose I mean, thank you. That's moving. But I suppose also why I brought up the Sitting Bull quote is, do you trust the faith and the genuineness of the people that you've signed the treaty with?
I do, in terms of when it comes to this Labor government. They've spent a degree of political capital on it, but of course we are in a position now because of the referendum, where we have the Liberal National parties here in Victoria saying that they will tear up the treaty within the first 100 sitting days of Parliament, which is quite an extraordinary thing to put your hand up for and to have as part of your agenda to be elected. So do I have faith in them to stand by this process? Of course I don't. But hopefully by then we'll get treaty so ensconced into the ways of working with government, but also in the ways of actually thinking about this place called Victoria, that the notion of tearing up a treaty that has been negotiated in good faith will seem as ridiculous as it sounds by the time the election comes around.
Well, we have to hope. Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
do have to hope. We do have to hope. I mean, one of the great quotes from the sort of introduction to the treaty, where it says, "This statewide treaty is shaped by an unbroken resolve passed through countless generations to bring us to this moment. Its foundation is resistance, its spine is truth, and its purpose is clear: to claim at last the dignity and justice of being treated as First Peoples. The dignity and justice of being treated as First Peoples always should have been, as equals in their own country and the first custodians of this land that we are all fortunate enough to live in." So really strong expression coming through in the formal documents. That, as you say, you'd have to think, I mean, fortunately, it's going to be a very long time before the Liberals can even hope to take government again in Victoria. So it should be by then that the institutions that are formed from this process will be entrenched. And there are a number of institutions too, as well as the People's Assembly, where the truth-telling will go on.
Yep, there'll be.
And there is an accountability body that is also being established to answer back to the community.
That's right. There are actual checks and balances in terms of the treaty itself being accountable to the Aboriginal community as much as anyone else. But also we have the government of the day making sure that it's accountable to the wider people of Victoria. I think the preamble does say it well, and I think we're really at a point now where this can actually be an example to other jurisdictions. We've learned a tremendous lot by going through this process, but it's now there for other jurisdictions, whether it's at a state or federal level, to pick up the playbook of how this happened and what occurred here, and apply it to other jurisdictions. One of the things that I've been sort of a little bit dismayed by in terms of the Albanese government is that it seems that they, despite making positive noises about it fairly recently, they seem to have walked away from the idea of a truth-telling process.
Yeah.
Because it's my view that if you have a truth telling process, that kind of inevitably leads to treaty anyway, because you learn what really happened here, and you think, well, what's the best way to remedy this? Is it by doing the things that we already do through the Closing the Gap agenda, where we have dozens of great Aboriginal organisations around the country that are funded through various governments, and therefore the balance of power and the balance of negotiation is totally skew-if, and all the power resides with the states and the federal governments and the departments? Or do you have an agreement negotiated by equals that says there's got to be a new way, and at the centre of that new way is listening to First Nations people as your fellow citizens and recognising that they are the first peoples of this place? If you do that, that's a great starting point.
I mean, there is kind of a nice through line here, Marie, isn't there? Because it was Whitlam himself, when he poured the handful of dirt into Vincent Lingiari's hand, which made that acknowledgement of this is your land.
Yes, that's true. But we should give Malcolm Fraser something too. He was very supportive of Indigenous self-development, and I was very struck by that on a number of occasions, by his willingness to defend Indigenous organisations against attacks that they were getting from particularly Joh Bjelke-Petersen. But he was strongly opposed to apartheid in South Africa, and he was very supportive of Indigenous development.
And it was actually the thing that Hawke says that he regrets the most, that he wasn't able to, or he felt that he wasn't able to. Some say that it was a question of political courage, but to keep the promise that he made that he would negotiate a treaty with First Nations people. Dave, you had I thought you had your pen waving around as you sometimes can. You say, Daniel, you hope, and we'll have to wind up because Dave's got to rush off in a minute, but that this could be an example for other jurisdictions. South Australia has the voice that it legislated pre the referendum that has had a few teething issues, but still does have support from the community. Has there been any suggestion that now that the voice is there, that may become a vehicle through which treaty negotiations could begin?
Potentially. I mean, if you've got a representative body that's already constituted and ready to go, then this treaty process is something that could easily be picked up by somewhere like South Australia. But when the treaty came through, I just posted on one of the socials, I don't know which one, is that, the legislation that passed, job done, now run like hell. Go as fast and as hard as you can with this, because not only will it make it harder to unpick, but it will also show people in other jurisdictions who are still waiting to see what the real outcomes from treaty are. It also demonstrates to them, okay, what is practically happening on the ground here? And I think that's what other jurisdictions like South Australia may be waiting to see before they go down this path as well, if they decide to.
Well, look, it's been a big week in Victoria. It's a big anniversary for the moment our democracy nearly failed us. Lot going on in Canberra even as we speak, but we have come to the end of another episode of the Sunday Shot. As ever, before we go, I'll just ask if anyone's got a top tip that they would like to share with our audience about something which has been on their minds or that they're keeping their eye on in the week coming up ahead. Daniel?
I would expect to see some more, I guess, very fervent activity from ICE coming up in the coming week. To send as a signal with the midterms coming up next year that Trump does basically have his own private army, which is one of the largest in the world, which is funded for $75 billion over the next 4 years. I expect to see them in the coming weeks flexing their muscles in democratic states.
Oh, God, that's, it's sort of one that you rush back. Marie, anything from you?
Oh, well, I think that's very important observation, because the Trump administration's going to have to find a way to strike back.
Yeah.
And clearly, it's always been in my mind anyway that they'll do everything they can to avoid the midterms.
Yeah, actually, to just try and derail them entirely, concoct an emergency, delay.
Well, very, very easily done in Trump's mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Dave, your top tip for the week?
Yeah, I'm just going to read a quick portion of Mamdani's speech that really stood out to me. Because he's talking honestly and truthfully rather than fawning in the face of Trump. And that's just really refreshing given our political leaders. If we embrace this brave new course rather than fleeing from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength it fears, not the appeasement it craves. After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. And if there is a way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power. This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one. So I think that we talked about a victory for the Democrats at the start of the show. I think what this is also, and perhaps more importantly, is a victory for the section of the Democrats that are not the corporate Democrats. This is a self-professed socialist Democrat that is tapping into the zeitgeist of this moment with real combative nature rather than here's a concession now that I'm in power, I'm going to do the neoliberal bullshit thing. This is something different.
It is something different. And I think that kind of the swell of support that Mamdani has and that notion of dismantling these great institutions which have delivered so much inequality to so many Americans, like that's the kind of energy that I think the Americans and indeed the Democrats need if they are to get rid of Trump and the MAGA movement more generally. That's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much for watching. We will leave you today with a little montage of when I went to Canberra on Tuesday night to support Punters Politics, our friend of the show, Conrad, with his big fundraising dinner, which was designed to raise money so that we can employ a lobbyist of our own. Pretty shocking that we might need one, but he was making very much the point about the lack of transparency and the dark money and influence that just basically control the corridors of Parliament House at will. So we'll leave you with that. We look forward to seeing you next week. As ever, like, subscribe, do those things. Give us some cash if you can so we can keep going. And we look forward to seeing you next Sunday.
Cheers.
The Sunday Shot has come to Canberra, people. We are here for Conrad's Punters Politics fundraising dinner, where Conrad is trying to raise enough money to employ a lobbyist for you, the people. So we're here to help him do just that. So it's already all happening and people were lining up, champing at the bit to get in. So it's pretty exciting.
I'm impressed. Red carpets are rolled out. Regular punters are ready to lobby politicians just like corporations do, just like lobbyists do. They have spent money to get special access to politicians. So I hope that tonight I can give them special access to politicians.
We have already spoken to a few very worthy people and organisations who are here representing kids just coming out of custody, things like that, hoping to actually get the ear. So it's not all satire. It is actually going to happen here tonight too.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope regular punters can see how the system works. I hope we can try and gear it to our favour, but I really hope that creating such a spectacle like this will make politicians think twice that, hey, maybe taking cash to take special meetings, maybe we think that's corrupt and maybe we should stop it, is the ultimate aim. And today we're really battling against the Nationals, dropping climate again, keeping us talking about will they, won't they, climate. Nah, we want to talk about cash for access. We want to talk about how politicians take money, political parties sell tickets for $15,000 to have a fancy three-course dinner with whoever's paying the price. So tonight, if democracy's for sale, we're putting in a bid.
So you two were first through the door, very keen, and you've got special yellow lanyards. Tell me what that's about.
Okay, so we're one of the sponsors, Funky Pies. Vegan pies all the way from Bondi to support this amazing idea, venture of Conrad and Punters Politics.
Many of us at the shot were very impressed at your courage and speaking up for the Palestinian people when not that many people were. It must have been a very big deal, though. You'd been a member of the Labor Party, you were elected as a young woman, you had been celebrated as a symbol of diversity, and then to have it come undone so quickly, it must have been a difficult time.
Definitely was a difficult time, but no regrets whatsoever. I hold on to the principles of justice and integrity very strongly, and justice for all people. So in this case it was the Palestinians. Tomorrow it can be someone else, but that fight never stops.
Do you still have the preference whisperer working for you?
No, actually. He's actually left the office a few months ago. I've got a new chief of staff, but, going strong this term.
So we've got some, I think, early possibilities for best dressed here tonight. You've made a bit of an effort, all of you. Can you talk us a little bit about what you've chosen to wear?
Well, I am the designer of this wonderful patch. I've decided I'm going just as money. I thought money. Yep. So I've got money here, I've got jewels here, and I've got money here. So that's my look. Yeah.
Money, 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 in fact, is what you've got. Whereas you've gone the embracing the fossil fuel look.
Yeah, the real estate Scott Morrison.
And you, on the other hand, you've got a bit worldwide fun.
Angel, I'm like the good Gina Reinhardt. Like I've got compost on my arm. I've got, electrify Canberra over here because we're into renewables. I've got climate action now. I should have a bit of wind power over here, but we sort of thought about that after.
So we have very much a study in contrasts. The sublime to the ridiculous, I think, is what we've got here. Helen Haynes, it's great that you're here tonight. What I have found really interesting is that there are genuine punters who have come here in order to have the opportunity to talk to politicians and to talk to them about issues that they really care about, which they probably don't get enough of an opportunity to do.
Joe, thank you. It's not only fun to be here, because this is a fun event, but it's a fun event with a really serious message, and that is who has access to power. I think that what many people tell me is that, they might have an opportunity to speak to their local member, or many of them say they can't actually get an appointment, which really surprises me. But it's the access to powerful decision making that's the key bit here, and who's influencing who.
Have you been disappointed at the performance of the Albanese government on transparency and the difference between what they were saying in opposition and how they've performed in government?
Yeah, well, I'm on the record as saying this, Joe. Am I surprised? Yeah, I am a bit. I'm disappointed because we saw some pretty egregious breaches of trust from the Morrison government, and then we had a Albanese government elected in 2022, re-elected in 2025 with a larger majority. And just before I got here tonight, and I got here a bit late because I was giving a speech in the House on the government's proposed changes to freedom of information law. Yeah. And if ever there's an issue for punters, it's this one. It's punters who put in those FOI requests. Now, there are a few issues that need to be addressed. That bill needs to be modernised, but what the government's trying to do, really, I am deeply opposed to. They are changing the law in regard to anonymity. So everyone who wants a freedom of information request, if they put one in, they have to say who they are. That's a real problem if you're a whistleblower. It's a real problem if you're an investigative journalist. They want people to pay. That's a real problem. Even if it's a modest fee, it's enough to turn some people off. There are so many elements to this, including what I think is the most egregious part, is they actually want to broaden the amount of information that can be considered cabinet in confidence, and we know from the recommendations of the Robo-Debt Royal Commission where they said actually we need to re-look at the cabinet in confidence section, not expand it, address it. So
and they're being a bit dishonest about that as well, which is really disappointing.
Yeah, I reckon they have, and it's why people like the Independents exist. Yeah. I know the government don't like it. They do not like us asking these questions. They do not like us raising a red flag on these issues. But I'll continue to do it because I think it is. I just think this is the demos in democracy. This is where the people are, and I really feel it's my job as a representative representative in the House of Representatives. It is what it says on the can. I need to represent what the people want, and the people want honesty and transparency. They want governments to make the decisions. Of course, they have to. They're elected to. But they want to see the why and the how and the who.
And how pissed off is the government with you right at the moment, extending question time last week?
A lot more than I thought. It's been interesting, all sorts of arguments that, Dorothy Dix is the bedrock of our democracy to a whole bunch of things, but it's all because they won't release a report, which I think is in the public interest and should be in the public domain. So I think it's a real sign of the Senate actually working as it should to hold the government to account.
And it was a report that was commissioned back in 2023 about, jobs for the mates, which they only actually commissioned because Sophie Scomps was going to bring in a private member's bill. They still haven't released it. What excuse are they giving to you?
They're claiming cabinet in confidence, but if you actually look at the standing orders of the Senate, just because the document has gone to cabinet doesn't mean that it would somehow reveal deliberations of cabinet. And if you go back through when the coalition were in power, Labor railed against this use of cabinet in confidence. And so, I guess it's one of those things you get frustrated hearing parties in opposition say, we'll be transparent, we're going to do things differently. Then they get in there and they're kind of doing a lot of the same things. And I think Australians expect better now.
Has the government sort of basically started ignoring you now that they don't need your vote? Like that honeymoon period where your vote could make the difference for them meant that they were being ultra charming? Is now you're no longer Don Farrell's best friend?
I mean, it's definitely different. I've got some good relationships in there, and I genuinely try and engage in good faith on issues. And despite the numbers in the Senate changing, we've seen like a huge win on aged care. The government bringing forward 20,000 places, which was advocacy from the crossbench. And then now on the Briggs review, I think you're seeing the crossbench actually working with the opposition to hold the government to account.
And whose politics do you think are worse, Ralph Babbitt's or Pauline Hanson's?
Yeah, we just had a vote in the Senate where my motion was to set aside uncontracted export gas for Australian manufacturers, businesses and households. And we had the entire crossbench, including One Nation and Ralph Babbitt, voting with the Greens, independents against the major parties who think that we should just export all of the gas. So, you work with these people every day, and I'm committed to engaging on the issues, and when we agree, we vote together, and disagree, we obviously don't.
So I think there has been quite a groundswell of negativity about the Chairman's Lounge of Qantas.
Yeah, Chairman's Lounge, it's on the nose. There is a Virgin one too, though.
Yeah, and apparently, though, someone at my table told me if people knew how good it was, they'd be even more furious.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So you're now an independent, but you were with the Jackie Lambie network. What the hell happened?
Jackie happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody that loves Jackie and enjoys who she is as a politician, as a human being, try being married to that. Yeah, nah.
You were lining up ready to come in, champing at the bit, which is an appropriate metaphor for today being Melbourne Cup Day. What brought you along? Just general fans of Conrad?
Yes, I think it's great. I'm really glad he's in the scene, and it's terrific to have someone independent like him challenging, and particularly on this issue about lobbying. It's just ridiculous, and I hate it. And I think I should be able to get a lobbying pass. Why can't I?
Yeah. So congratulations on your attire. Very smart. Very pleased to see that Canberra's keeping up the sartorial stakes. We know about the yellow lanyards, another sponsor. Yeah, and Basuta too. So you're letting the side down a little bit, I have to say, with the mismatching, but that's okay. That's okay.
I respect that.
So you guys, first of all, you're ordinary punters. What brought you here today?
Yeah, definitely coming along with them. But also, I think it's outrageous that people can pay so much to lobby politicians. I think we should have more transparency and more accessibility to our politicians. Yeah.
So we're going to have our own lobbyist, it seems, roaming the streets of Parliament House. Is that part of the attraction for you?
100%. We're going to get more money into politics, fund our politicians more privately.
We need to have some good money in politics to try and outweigh the bad. You brought some good money into politics, though, by sponsoring tonight. Tell us about your organisation.
So it's not my organisation, it's Michael's organisation. I'll let Michael speak.
So I run a not-for-profit in the justice space. So we house kids that are coming out of custody. Just here to really advocate for the problems that really start at the top up in Parliament, and the policies that are really creating systemic disadvantage for young people. Yeah.
So you're here on quite a serious issue then, and hoping to actually get the ear of some of the politicians who are here tonight to raise these concerns.
Correct, yeah.
Great. Well, let's hope we can. You've got some of the good guys here tonight. A couple of the not so good guys as well, but we'll see how we go. So you've shamelessly paid for access this evening. Are you going to try and buttonhole some politicians, or is it more about supporting Conrad, or a bit of both?
Well, for us, it's really about getting the word out there about our organisation and what we're doing, and making community connections, because we figured this is the kind of event where we're going to meet a lot of like-minded people who want to make a real difference to our Australian communities, and that's what we're invested in. So that's what's drawn us all the way over from WA tonight. And yeah, we're hoping that we can make the most of it and make some good connections.
So you might be the furthest travelled coming here tonight. So tell us a little bit about your organisation.
The Affordable Housing Action Initiative has been formed by a range of multidisciplinary individuals, and we've come together around creating a housing first movement in Australia. So we've recognised that the housing crisis is essentially a catastrophic failure mode for society, and it's crashing, and not enough is being done to rectify it, so we've stepped up to do it. Yeah.
Well, good on you, because if you don't have housing, you don't have stability, and without stability, it's very hard to get employment. So that is really one of the first steps that need to be taken. So, and it's great to have you along and on board. Thank you. Black Frog Solar, tell us about you.
So, my name's Jeff Florence. I'm the CEO and manager of Black Frog Solar. We're a Brisbane-based company.
And what drew you to tonight's event and Conrad and Punters politics?
More the disillusionment of seeing what my children are growing up to have as their future. And I don't think it's a very promising future at the moment in Australia. And we need to make a change. And it all starts from a small movement. And I want to be part of that small movement.